Hello, this is Zekon and my assistant Doskef, and today we're going to teach you some combat basics in Gloria Victis, which should help ease you into the combat. So for start, we're going to go through different classes such as tanks, medics, archers and two-handers, and we're going to show you how to block first. So as you can see on my screen, there is when you move your mouse around, there's a wheel, and it shows which direction you'll either be attacking or blocking. Up and down are both central blocks, left and right obviously different. I'd recommend binding these to your keyboard as it can be tricky during a fight to turn, use your mouse and block at the same time in the direction, as it can get clunky. My friend Doskef here is going to attack now, and it will show you what happens. Whilst he's attacking, you can see a block indicator comes up, or an attack indicator, and it will show you the direction from which they're attacking. You block accordingly. There are 4 different types of attack. There is left attack, right attack, stab attack, and overhead attack. I'd recommend key binding the stab attack, as looking down and stabbing is difficult, so bind it to the middle mouse button for easier use. There are 3 types of charge on your attack as well. There's green, yellow and red. Green does the least damage but is the fastest, yellow does the second most damage and is slightly slower, and red does the most damage but is the slowest. Each weapon has different speeds as well. We'll get more into that later. If you attack an opponent with a green attack, it will stagger. This causes your character to be temporarily unable to fight back. This is a good opportunity to strike them back, and this is why you shouldn't be hitting on green, only yellow and red. If you hit on yellow or red, it doesn't stagger. Also, charging a red attack interrupts the opponent's swing. But yellow and green do not do this. Next on to shield blocking. Shield blocking blocks from all directions from the front, regardless of the attack. But shielders can be attacked from behind, and it does increase damage due to the backstab. Shielders can also use shield bashes, which can stun or stagger an enemy depending on their build talents. And this is useful against two-handed enemies during a large fight, as you can interrupt them and they won't be particularly looking for your shield bash. Not recommended against shielders though, as if you get blocked using a shield bash, you stagger yourself. Next on to is medics. Medics have a particular build tree, which means they lack other stats, but as you can see here on the right, this is the medic tree. Medics are able to revive people during combat with a significant portion of their health back. This is useful, obviously, but they can be interrupted by a shield bash. Here, my friend Doskef is about to die, and I will revive him. To revive, simply press the E to show menu and give first aid. Healers have a reduced resurrection time, and aside from shield bashes, can't be interrupted, as I stated before. Archery is all about keeping your distance and aiming for the head. My current character does not have the correct abilities for an archer, so will lack damage in the archery department. Heavy players will take the least damage from archers, whereas medium players will take the most damage from archers. Archery has a few pros. If Doskef blocks, you are still able to hit the head of the tank player. This is where the most damage is given. Additionally, if Doskef tries to run away, and you're shot in the leg, it will do a leg shot, which will slow them down so they are able to be caught up to by other players of your team. But archers are very weak against attacks, especially from heavy melees, and take considerably more damage than any other class. For this, archers commonly use a dagger or a two-handed sword or spear. Spears are great for archers as they can keep the opponent at a distance, deal nice damage, but not get killed too fast. It is good to practice with these types of weapons, so that if a heavy comes running at you like Doskef will now, and tries to attack, you can learn to block and then attack back. You can also use swords as stated before, which does a lot of damage, but you get a lot closer to the target, which is not the best move for an archer, so you'd need more practice to do that. Archers are best played from a distance, but if melees need help, they definitely need to get a weapon out, start stabbing too. Kicking. Kicking is a very important skill when it comes to particularly shield guys. My friend Doskef here is going to put up his block. If I kick, it's going to stun him and open up his shield. But if the block is down, the kick simply does a little bit of damage. So time your kicks correctly, otherwise they can attack you whilst you're kicking. Kicking leaves you open to an attack if not done correctly. Feinting is an important part of GV. After you've learnt a little bit of the game and got more used to the combat, feinting is simply charging or chambering an attack and then blocking instead. This causes the attack indicator to trigger so you can try and confuse your opponent to which direction you're actually about to attack. This is handy comboing with kicks, so then your opponent is thrown off by which direction to block from, and you can strike them with a kick. This is more effective on two-handers as the shield is an all blocking machine, so you don't need to change direction. Armors. Light armor is used by archers and should really only be used by archers. Archers should be wearing all light gear, and usually sometimes a shield on their back, but only a light shield, as heavy shields reduce their damage too much. This is often not the best idea to be wearing it out and about, so if you chamber one onto your hotbar, and then you can equip it when you need it. Heavy shields are used more so by tanks because they have increased shield duration, which means they can take more hits before breaking, and they also have superior stats. Doskef is going to hit my shield and show the effects of shield durability. Different weapons have a different impact on shields. A sword won't cost that much to the durability of the shield, but an axe will. Axes take the durability of the shield down significantly faster. Once the shield durability drops to 0, you are reduced to blocking manually instead of shield blocking. This means you have to directionally block again until your shield regains durability. For light users, you can see the damage multiplier should be 1. This means they'll do the most damage with their weapons, and usually with their builds, bows and spears or swords. Medium armor. Medium armor is commonly worn by two-handers, which are bruisers. This is because it offers reasonable protection, also allows a little bit extra damage. Light shields are also recommended for bruisers, unless you plan on being more of a tank than a bruiser. The best combination for a bruiser is 4 pieces of heavy armor and 2 pieces of medium armor. This is because the 2 pieces give a significant damage multiplier, but if you had all medium, you'd lack protection. Bruisers are essentially the frontline attackers. They still do a lot of damage, they can get up close in people's faces, but they're not good with a bow, and you can't use a bow in anything other than light armor. The shield is the last line of defense if you get swarmed. As stated before, light shields have significantly less durability. Two-handers are also great in a shield wall. This is because they stand behind their tanks when they put their shields up, and the tank blocks the damage while they poke and jab the enemy through the shield wall. This is best with long-range weapons such as spears, the Horden spear, and the halberd. Heavy armor is what tanks use. This is because it has the highest protection out of all the armor sets. It's 6 pieces heavy. It also has the highest damage drainer, so you do the least damage as a tank. But you also take the least damage as a tank. Tanks should be using all heavy armor and a heavy shield. This is to offer the most protection. But tanks are still able, if needed, to switch to a two-handed weapon to deal a reasonable amount of damage. This is really only necessary if they are in the front line and their shield durability goes to 0. They can switch to a two-hander temporarily to offer damage while their shield goes back up. Medics should also be wearing heavy armor, as they need to be standing, taking damage often. Doskef here is a medic. He is wearing all heavy and will always be wearing all heavy. This is so while they're resin people, they don't get insta-killed by the enemy. There are various types of weapon in the game, and depending on what your opponent is wearing for armor, different ones do more damage. For example, a heavy user like Doskef will take more damage from a hammer. Particularly overheads. This is because tanks have the least bludgeoning resistance. Light users have the least slashing resistance. This means they will take the most damage from weapons such as a sword or a halberd. Medium users have the least piercing reduction, which means they'll take considerably more damage from bows and spears. On the flip side, tanks have the most resistant to piercing, second most resistant to slashing, and obviously none in bludgeoning. Medium offers reasonable slashing protection and significantly better bludgeoning resistance, though wearing all medium is not recommended because archers will cut you down too fast. Light users are reasonably resilient against bows, but they're not particularly resilient against anything, so most things can cut them down pretty handily. Different types of weapons have different speeds. One-handed weapons will attack faster. Two-handed weapons will attack slower, but usually do more damage. Also, in addition to that, one-handed weapons produce less stamina drain than two-handed weapons. stamina can be seen on the right of your hotbar. One-handeds are nice for tanks because tanks already, with their heavy armor, have the highest stamina drain, which means they run out of stamina considerably faster than other classes. Light users have least stamina drain, which means they can run further and swim for longer than any other class. Medium is, well, medium, it's in between heavy and light. Builds are an important part of the game. This is your attribute points and your passive abilities. Tanks should be going on the left hand side of the tree and focusing more on constitution and strength. This is because the left hand side of the tree has abilities like Tough One, Evade, Man of Steel. These include increasing your health, increasing your heavy armor's piercing, slashing and bludgeoning damage reductions. And Unstoppable is also a very useful end game ability, which allows you to get staggered instead of stunned. When an opponent is stunned, it means they cannot move or do anything during the duration. If they're staggered, they can still move about, which can be handy for trying to avoid damage during fights. Constitution is handy because it increases health and health regen. This is particularly handy for a tank, as you need as much health as you can get. It also increases your stamina regen, which you need as a tank, because if you run out of stamina blocking while you're blocking with your shield, you're going to run into some problems. And there's also heavy armor, which has the most stamina drain as well. Strength is only necessary because it also increases stamina and stamina regen, but it has a little bit of damage. There's no point in going past 300 points into Constitution, as after that the points become meaningless. So if you go in a tank, go to around 300 Constitution and 140 Strength. Archers should be focusing on the right hand side of the tree with their passive abilities. This is because Strongman, Brute and other piercing abilities are good for the bow. This is to increase the damage that you deal with the bow and your spears. They should be focusing on dexterity and putting pretty much all of their points in there, and maybe a little bit of Constitution or Strength depending on your preference, though I'd recommend Constitution, just so you have a little extra health. Dexterity increases damage dealt with bows, knives and swords. It also increases your headshot and backstab damage. This is obviously very good for archers. Bruisers should be having a combination of the tank and the archer build, but straying away less from the right hand side and staying more towards the left still. This is for things like breath control and finesse, so you lose less stamina when attacking and holding weapons. Also, top tier abilities for bruisers can be battle rage, so your attacks cannot be interrupted for the first 15 seconds that you're below 60% health. And survival instinct, that means you can't be slowed down once you're below 40% health. These often have a cooldown though, so remember that. For bruisers, the attribute should be quite a bit Constitution, say maybe 210, and then the resting strength, so about 255. This is because you want more strength than Constitution, as your aim is to deal damage, but you also don't want to be lacking in the health, also because you'll be wearing heavier armor too. This part of the video will go over tinctures, bandages and pots. Bandages and pots are useful in combat. If Doskef here hits me and causes bleeding damage, I can use a bandage to stop the bleeding and regenerate my health back. You can use these in combat, though obviously if you're in the front line, it is not recommended. It's best if you pull back first and find a nice place to heal up. Bandages don't need to be used if you are bleeding though, and will still give you health back even if you are not bleeding. There are pots you can use for combat, such as a quill and wine and monastic meat. These two give their own buffs for a short period of time. If I use a quill and wine, it will give me a buff for a short period of time. This is often 5 minutes. If Doskef hits me and I get out of combat, My health will regenerate slightly faster than it did before. Monastic Mead is a stamina pot, and this will increase your stamina total for a short duration as well. The last part of this video will go over tinctures. Tinctures are something you can stack up, and they give you a long duration buff if you stack them up enough. If you only use one, it'll only give you a short duration, not so powerful buff, but if you use say 7 often at the same time, they'll give you a long duration buff. Tinctures can be crafted or bought at the auction house. Once you've used 7 at a time, they'll often give you a 15-minute debuff called Toxicity, which will reduce your health and stamina for a small amount of time. Once that's faded though, you'll have the new buff and you won't have a debuff anymore. Tinctures can also be used at the same time with your wines or mead, so there's no need to worry about that. Though I wouldn't recommend trying to stack your meads or wine, because that will make you sick. You can also use bandages as well at the same time, and you don't need to worry about it. This tincture here is the anesthetic tincture. This is okay for tanks, but not the best, which is protectant tincture. Protectant tincture will reduce the incoming damage by 10%. This one will reduce the stamina cost for blocking and will reduce the shield endurance cost for blocking. This means your shield will have more endurance and you'll be able to hold it up for longer during fights.